Welcome to episode 319 of the AM/PM podcast. In this podcast, I'm speaking with Korion Morris. Korion is one of the main guys over at Unybrands, one of the big aggregators in the space. They keep a low profile, so you might not be too familiar with them, but he's got a lot of great information to share. This is going to be a really fun episode, and I just want to apologize in advance if my voice is a little bit shaky. I'm recovering from having pneumonia, so my voice might be a little bit shaky in some parts of this, but enjoy.
Welcome to the AM/PM podcast. Welcome to the AM/PM podcast, where we explore opportunities in e-commerce.
We dream big and we discover what's working right now.
Plus, this is the podcast where money never sleeps, working around the clock in the AM and the PM.
Are you ready for today's episode?
I said, are you ready? Let's do this. Here's your host, Kevin King. Kevin King.
Welcome, Korion, to the AM/PM podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. This should be a pleasant one to the ear for everybody because you have the voice built for podcasts.
Kevin, I appreciate it. First off, super excited to be here. And second, I've always kind of said, if all this Amazon stuff doesn't work out, I think I'll either end on the radio or with podcasts.
Exactly, and I think you'll have a good future with that. I think we just last saw each other just a few weeks ago at the AMZ Innovate, right? You guys were there sponsoring that?
Yeah, I feel like, we've seen each other on a few occasions now. So, we had a big presence at AMZ Innovate just a few weeks ago in New York, and it was a tremendous experience. I've been, incredibly impressed by just the quality of people in the Amazon community. And I kind of selfishly am the only one that tends to experience these experiences, but it was great to pull our CEO in and several members of our team to come in and experience the Innovate event.
Yeah, that event was a great experience while I was there for me, but the experience afterwards was horrible. I actually ended up getting pneumonia at that event. I came back. That event was on a Monday. Flew back on Tuesday. Tuesday night, started feeling a little funky. Wednesday, lost my appetite, having some dry heaves, starting to get a fever. By Friday, I was down and out in the bed. And I was like, man, I must have got a bad flu. A few other people were posting online like, hey, anybody else get the flu at Innovate? A few other people were saying, yeah, I picked it up. I don't know if it happened at Innovate, but it could happen anywhere along the way. But several people that were there were reporting that they got something, and I did a COVID test. I did the whole 9 yards, and it's like, man, this is just something not right here. And one of the things about COVID is that your blood oxygen level goes down. So you use those little pulse meters that measure your pulse. You put them on your finger, and also gives you your blood oxidation level. So I grabbed one of those, had my wife bring me one. And the number was like 80. And anything below 88 is like, go straight to the hospital. And so wow. I was like, holy cow, that's not good. So I was like, and I think maybe I just need to hydrate here. Maybe this is just the flu. So I started hydrating. I had one of those mobile IV surfaces come out, infuse me with vitamins and everything. And the next day, it wasn't getting any better. And so I was like, I called my doctor, and he's like, yeah, you need to get to the ER. Go into the ER, they run a bunch of scans, say, yep, you got pneumonia. You got water on your lungs, in fact. And so I ended up being hospitalized for the last for 4 days after that.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and running all kinds of tests, and they put me on some supplemental oxygen to get it back up. It was a mess. No fun for anybody. So hopefully, now I know there's a pneumonia shot, and I'll be getting that shot. But that wasn't pleasant. But speak of unpleasant, we were at another event together in Austin, the Collective Mind Society event back at the end of October during the F1 races. And at this event, we decided, you were there, you were one of the 12 that was there, and we decided to have a little contest we had a little cabana, on the side of the track, nice little experience. And one day we let's run a contest. Who wants to compete? Who thinks they can handle hot, spicy stuff? And I think there was like four or five of you, about 6 of you actually that raised your hand.
Yes.
2 ended up backing out after they found out what it was. And then 4 of you, including yourself, decided, hey, I'll participate in this. We put a little bit of cash on the line, and it was the one chip challenge. So what this is if those of you listening, it's a single chip, like a single potato chip or a corn chip, basically, but it's super spicy. So you eat this single chip, and you see how long you can last without drinking. And if you can go for an hour without drinking, you're considered like a stud. I know there's different levels. If you make it 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, I think hour is invincible is what it is. And so 4 of you did this. You handled it really, really well. 2 of the other guys, one of them was Howard Ty. He was like, this is no big deal. Give me, I could eat these all day long as a snack. 2 of the other guys were like tearing. Their eyes were tearing. They were watering. They were just like, I don't know, but they stuck it out. All 4 of you made it the hour without taking a drink. And during that first hour, you were just totally like, I got this, no problem. And then after that, we left to go to a concert. And we're going to see Green Day, which is at the track there. And I think something happened as we left to you, and I'll let you explain it. As we were going to that Green Day concert, I think your life changed a little bit for a while.
That I would say that's the understatement of the year. So, I think I'll preface with, I love spicy stuff. I love hot stuff, right? And so there's never been a challenge that I wouldn't take on. And I was an athlete in kind of a prior life. And so I'm competitive. So I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. And to be fair, I hadn't done any research on the one chip challenge. I didn't know what I was in for. So to your point, the first hour, no big deal. It's hot, like my mouth is burning, but it's manageable. And then I hear, 2 of the other guys start to say like, my stomach doesn't feel so great. And I'm like, huh, okay. Well, like they did 2 chips. So maybe that's why. Generally I feel fine. And, when we were waiting for the shuttle on the track, I'm sitting there and I'm like starting to feel like something's not quite right. And I'm like, I'll just ignore it. I'll try to like take in the views. We start driving on the track and the turns get, my stomach acid, I think to kind of, going side to side a little bit. I'm like, okay, something doesn't feel right, but I'll keep pushing on. And then, we get dropped off at the concert and, I see one of the guys on his knees and I'm like, that's not good. Okay. But like, I'll keep pushing. No big deal. 30 yards later, I get like the sharpest pain ever in my stomach. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to stop. And it's like, it just feels like somebody's taking a hot knife and just taking it through your stomach. And so I probably stopped for, a good minute or 2. And while I'm bent over, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm in the middle of Circuits of America track. No, like, I have no refuge, and so that's going through my mind. I'm like, okay, we'll just push on. Everybody stops. I make it probably another 50 yards. And again, the pain comes back and it's 3 times as bad. And I'm like, I'm just at my knees. I'm like, this is the worst pain that I've ever felt in my life. And, I think that time I take a second break, probably, a good 5 or 6 minutes, the second go around. And then slowly but surely we make our way over to the concert. And those 2 waves are the worst. I think I had some discomfort, for like another 24 hours. But the worst was behind me, fortunately.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that you're a big guy. You used to play football. And so you're a big guy, and to see you hunkered over on the ground, taken down by a little tortilla chip was a sight to see.
I'd be lying if I said that my pride wasn't hurt a little bit. One unsuspecting chip, and when I think of when I think of these hot challenges, my default is like, oh, how bad is it in your mouth? Like maybe you'll sweat. Like no big deal. I don't assume that you're going to feel it in your stomach, 24 hours later, and that's ultimately I think what did me in.
And you're a man, and I don't want to get too graphic here, but I want to paint a picture. You said it actually hurt when you went to the restroom too, right?
Yeah. So like, it's weird because it wasn't any like, issues with like number 2 or anything like that, but like it burned significantly when I got up the next morning to go to the restroom. And that was a unique experience and one that I wouldn't wish on anybody.
Oh man, I can only imagine. I feel sorry for you.
Well, I would say probably nothing compared to the pneumonia, and I'm so glad to hear that you're on the mend and you're doing a little bit better now. I did actually receive a notification on my phone stating that like I was in close proximity with somebody who had COVID, and it was from that week. So I was fortunate to escape it. Glad you're on the mend, but yeah, would certainly never wish the one chip challenge on anybody. I think we'll have to raise the purse next go around. I've got to be closer to probably 5 or 10K to make it worthwhile.
Now we first met, I think, at the $1 Billion Seller Summit. Is that correct? You came out to represent the company that you work for, Unybrands. Tell me, what is Unybrands?
Yeah, absolutely. So Unybrands is a strategic acquirer of Amazon and direct-to-consumer brands. I think a lot of people will refer to us as an aggregator. We are founded in September of 2020, operated in stealth mode until February of 2021, and have since just seen tremendous growth. And so, I kind of wear two hats. I certainly, focus on the acquisitions function for Unybrands, but also, as somebody who was a part of kind of the Amazon ecosystem in a prior life, understand how much valuable insight and knowledge and relationships there are to be had. And I heard, tremendous things about $1 Billion Seller Summit. And so, as soon as I learned about, $1 Billion Seller Summit in Austin, I wanted to make sure I came down and connect with some of the community.
So what is your background? I mean, I know you went to college, you played football in school. What happened after that? What's the progression to get you to Unybrands? Were you an e-commerce seller, or can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but I was a track and field athlete and football player in college. Track and field, you kind of have no delusions of grandeur, right? It's like, hey, college is paid for, and then you're going to have to get a real job at some point. And so it was pretty clear to me that I wanted to pivot into the world of entrepreneurship. And so right actually out of undergraduate, I discovered a love for automobiles, and I started a small kind of auto customization shop, essentially initially doing high-end car stereos, but eventually over time pivoting into comprehensive restoration. So, I was working with somebody in the Middle East. I would customize a car, ship it over to the Middle East, and then they would, essentially sell it to a client who, had a lot of money and had an affinity for American muscle cars.
This was like a workshop, like a garage.
Correct. Yes.
And it was all yours, or you had partners with that?
It was all mine. Really, my background, I did a lot of, kind of electrical work and different things like that. But you could essentially think of me like a general contractor. So I had a paint shop that I would work with. I would do kind of all the design and creative for the build, the customer management, put everything together. But I worked with, the best upholstery shop called Davis Brothers Upholstery here in the Pacific Northwest. I'd work with, really great motor builder, and just bring kind of the best people under one umbrella to deliver really kind of beautiful cars. And so I did that for several years, thoroughly enjoyed it. And at that time, I was actually a track and field coach in college, in high school as well, just as a fun way to give back to the community. And I would come back after practice. I'd go work at my shop for a few hours, and I noticed that I was just feeling increasingly tired and lethargic. And over the course of noticing that for several months, I also started to notice some lumps in my neck. And I went to my mom's house and I said, "Hey, does my neck look kind of weird to you?" And she says, "Yeah, I think so. I think you need to go to the doctor." And so went into the doctor and found out, that I had two masses in my necks. My lymph nodes were enlarged, and spent the next month trying to diagnose exactly what it was, and ultimately, discovered that I had cancer. And so at that point, went immediately into, got a port installed, had it staged, and went into chemotherapy, and eventually kind of closed the business because I just didn't have the health or the ability at that time to continue to run the business. And so spent about a year going through chemotherapy, radiation, and then once that was all done, took another probably 6 to 8 months to try to get kind of recover. Essentially chemo is they're poisoning your body. And so, it took a lot, even though I was only, at that time, 27 years old, took a lot to get my health back. And so at that point, it's like, okay, what's next? I have this entrepreneurship bug. I know what I'm really excited and passionate about. Eventually I want to get into business at kind of a larger scale. And so I joined up with 3 older gentlemen who were, very seasoned entrepreneurs, and launched a company in the gift, novelty, and souvenir space. We built out a very robust IP portfolio and started selling initially into brick and mortar retail here in the Pacific Northwest. And then over time started to expand that into retail nationally, internationally, and then also broke into e-commerce. And so spent several years doing that, scaling that company. And then in 2019, we were fortunate to sign an exclusive licensing agreement with a private equity firm to leverage our intellectual property. And so we exited that company, and kind of the rest is history as it relates to that.
So how did you hook up with Unybrands then?
Yeah. So after this exit, kind of when we were in the tail end of running the company, I knew that I wanted to go back to school. One of the things about being an athlete in college is, your entire life is athletics. And so it's difficult. I actually love to learn. I love being in college. And so I always knew I wanted to go back. And so in kind of our last year, as we were preparing to exit, I did my MBA at University of Washington and learned about this idea of roll-ups. And I thought that was really interesting. But I also had kind of an appetite to transition into the corporate world for whatever kind of odd reason. So directly after the acquisition, I went to Zulily. I spent about 2 years there doing strategic partnerships, working with some of the biggest brands, and pretty quickly fell out of love with the company. I thought the model was pretty archaic. And so started looking at okay, how can I marry this interest in e-commerce with this idea of roll-ups? And, was kind of lucky. I was just searching around on for different companies that one day came across Unybrands. I think at that point in time, there was 4 people in the company, and sent over an email and said hey, you guys are looking for somebody, for your acquisition function. Let's have a chat. And they loved my background. We immediately hit it off. And so I ultimately joined the company as, I want to say number 7 or 8, pretty early on.
How many are there now?
So I want to say all in, we're over 150 people. So it's been quite the growth story. And that's part of, I think, what really got me excited, right? It's one thing to take a company and go from, nothing to a few $1 million. But to have a hyper growth story, right? To go from 5 people to, let's say, 500 people in a few years, I think is a really interesting process. And I think, it takes certainly skill, but a little bit of luck as well to be in the right place at the right time to be a part of that type of story. And so it's been tremendous. I'm really proud of what we've built. I'm proud of the culture that we've established, and the brand that we're starting to build in the ecosystem as well.
And what's your exact role there? Are you in the acquisitions? Are you in the business development?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear, like any startup, I wear a lot of different hats. So my technical role is, I'm the director of growth for the US. So I really focus on identifying world-class assets for our team to acquire. My team will do the initial pre-LOI due diligence, and then we'll hand it over to our investment function that will, come up with the valuation for the asset and then really kind of own the diligence process. But, as somebody who is a seller, I feel like part of my role is to be a representative of sellers, right? So whether it's from a transaction structure perspective, whether it's from, how do we actually build this thing so that it's sustainable and that it's around in 10 to 15, 20 years, I really pride myself in sharing kind of any and all insights that I have as somebody who was a seller, and then that I have from great conversations with people like yourself.
So are people coming to you directly or through brokers, or are you actually also out there beating the pavement, looking for opportunities and approaching them?
Yeah, all of the above, right? So we absolutely partner with brokers. I'll be the first to tell you, if you've never had a liquidity event before, it probably behooves you to work with a broker, because there's somebody who deals with us kind of day in and day out, and they know how to maximize your exit. But we also have technology that enables us to go out and identify world-class brands, and so we build direct relationships that way. And then I attend phenomenal events like $1 Billion Seller Summit and Amazon Innovate to go out and meet people as well. So I think we pride ourselves in leaving no stone unturned, and really trying to go out and find great brands. And I think the other thing that's worth flagging with us is it's never about pressure, right? Like, it's really about supporting people in their journey. When the time is right, if you're looking to exit, hey, let's have a chat. I'm happy to answer questions. And if you work with us, that's great. If not, that's okay too.
So are you doing, is Unybrands just doing Amazon businesses or any kind of e-commerce business? Yeah.
So the answer, I think, is going to changes over time, right? So if you ask me that question a year ago, it's like, hey, strictly Amazon. We want, let's say 90% of revenue coming from FBA, and then we'll entertain kind of 10% coming from elsewhere. I think today, as we've built an actual platform that can operate the brands, we've demonstrated the ability to grow our brands and scale. I think we're a little bit more flexible. We're still Amazon centric. So, let's say it's a brand that's doing 60% on Amazon and 40% off. We're much more willing to entertain that than we were a year ago. And we might even look at 50-50 split. And I think that will continue to evolve. So let's say 6 months or a year from now, we might look to make our first outright D2C acquisition. I think, our view on this is most of our brands will at least have some component of Amazon. Many of them will have, direct to consumer component. And then I think, there will also be a subset of brands that have staying power and are well positioned to go into retail as well. What's
the biggest value you guys can add to an existing brand by taking it over or taking it in-house?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? I think the answer varies on a brand by brand basis, right? So there's brands out there where, cash flow has been really tight and we can provide a tremendous cash flow and we're essentially just adding fuel to the fire. Or, there's transactions that we've done where the founder has stayed on board with us and we're able to take all the things that they aren't interested in or that they're not the best at. And we can, put that onto our platform and then free them up to do what they do really well, right? So how do those founders specifically create value for their organization, whether it's new product development, new partnerships. So I think there's instances of that as well. I think, a few things about us is we are transatlantic. So, I'm seated in Seattle, but we have offices in New York, Miami, London, Berlin, and Shanghai. And so one of the first things that we evaluate when we acquire a brand is, can we grow this brand internationally? Can we move it into new marketplaces? Beyond that, we really look to understand, I think, at a very granular level, what has the founder done well? What are they excited about? What are the growth opportunities that they have? And then we really incorporate that into our growth strategy and our plan. But I think, for us, it's really about, we're not going to overextend ourselves. We're going to buy high quality brands that we know that we have the ability to operate well. And we're going to deliver. So we're going to pay our earnouts where we're going to, ensure that the seller has an experience that they're proud of.
How much money has Unybrands raised to finance all this?
Yeah, so we've raised over $300 million in growth capital to date. So that's a combination of some debt as well as some equity that we've raised.
What's the range typically that you're spending? Is it $500,000 to $5 million, or what type of range or size of businesses, or what's the largest one, for example, that you've done?
Yeah, so we're pretty flexible, right? I think we're incredibly well capitalized, and so if there's an exciting opportunity out there, we always want to take a look at it. I think early in our life cycle, we would, looking at kind of, let's say, $1 million top line minimum assets up to, let's say, $5 million. I think that threshold now is, a minimum of kind of $2 million top line, and we're happy entertaining upwards of 20 million plus. I've looked at, a $50 million plus asset. It just wasn't the right fit for us. So we certainly have the capital to deploy to be aggressive, acquire large assets. But it's really a matter of, does it fit into our portfolio? We think a lot about portfolio concentration. So, how does that play into everything? And then ultimately, is this a business that's really growing in a category that we feel like is growing as well?
So for portfolio fit, do you focus on certain categories? Or are you open to anything? Or how's that work?
Yeah, so we definitely are category focused. So there's 8 specific categories that we play in. Those are personal care, pet care, home care, baby and juvenile, sports and fitness, garden and outdoor, and home, culinary, lifestyle, and arts. I kind of joke that feels like everything, with the exception of maybe apparel and electronics. And kind of our view is, generally we look to acquire, really high quality differentiated brands that are anchor brands in each of these categories, right? And once you've acquired a great, anchor brand, which typically is going to be a little bit larger, has great infrastructure, then we can start to look at, okay, what are bolt-on opportunities in those specific categories as well. And so, I won't mention the specific brand, but we own, a tremendous brand in the pet care space. And we've added a really phenomenal anchor brand into its portfolio. And so there's, some synergies there. And we can continue to bolt on, really great brands that support that anchor brand, but also stand alone on their own.
So where do you see this whole acquisition industry going? It kind of came from nowhere. I mean, it started with 101 Commerce, that they crashed and burned. And then Thrasio kind of led the way and got a lot of media attention, brought a lot of other people into the space. by some estimate, 130, 150 aggregators out there. Now, multiples went way up. Now they're coming back down. Like you said, a lot of them have pulled back. The financing's been cut off. They're not buying anything anymore. Where do you see this going? Do you think this is still going to be a really robust market, or is it going to be more choosy now from both your point of view as an aggregator and the seller's point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think kind of a combination of everything, right? I don't know that this model is going anywhere because I think that there's a tremendous opportunity. One of the things that our CEO Ulrich talks about, he spent over 25 years selling businesses at Goldman Sachs, and nobody has really demonstrated an ability to build a platform and sustainably operate and scale kind of micro brands. And I think consumers have really demonstrated an appetite for micro brands where, if I can buy or purchase a product from a brand that resonates with me and my values and more directly addresses my needs, I think that's huge. I think that appetite will continue to grow. And so I think we'll continue to see micro brands established, grow. Some of those micro brands will turn into household brands as well. And I think people will continue to try to acquire and kind of roll those up as well. I think, kind of on the market side, from the aggregator side, I don't have a crystal ball, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, more consolidation where, I think to your point, there's 150 plus aggregators, right? And a lot of people have struggled to raise rounds following the rounds that they raised last year. And so I think you will see consolidation. I think you'll see, people become a little bit more niche oriented. So, for us, we are across 8 different categories, right? You've seen this happen a little bit already. Maybe, more people will start to focus on specific categories. Maybe they'll focus on baby and juvenile, or I've heard of other ones that focus, strictly on supplements, for example, right? To where you can build very specific expertise, which I think helps from an operational standpoint. But also I think, as it relates to interacting with sellers, I'm going to be really excited about selling my brand to somebody who only does supplements, if I'm a supplements brand, because I know that's what they know, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised to see more of that as well. I think, for sellers, we're certainly in kind of a buyer's market at the moment. So you've seen multiples decline a lot. That's not to say that there's some of us that will still pay a really fair valuation on your business, right? Like if you have a quality business, especially in this environment, I think that's that much more impressive. And we really pride ourselves in offering a fair value for your business. And so that's not to say that you won't get fair valuations, but I think it'll likely take for the economy to start to recover, for brands to start to grow consistently, and then for a handful of aggregators to feel like, hey, we know that we can operate these brands well, before you start to see multiples really start to climb back up.
Do y'all factor that in, that we're headed towards a recession and things are down? A lot of Amazon sellers year over year down 20, 30% right now. Do you factor that in? Because they're not having this massive growth. They may have flatlined a little bit. How does that factor into when someone goes to sell or when you're evaluating a company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, I think one of the first things that we like to think about is, we look to buy businesses that are growing. We look to buy businesses that, have momentum. I think a year ago, we might look at it in a very kind of black and white way of saying like, hey, in your LTM period, are you seeing margin compression? Are we seeing category compression or things like that? I think now we're looking a little bit more at, what's momentum look like in the recent 3 to 6 months. And I think something that's really important for us as people that are operators and as people that were sellers at one point as well is to, we want to hear the founder's story, right? Like I think it goes beyond kind of the quantitative part of all of this, right? Where it's just numbers in an Excel sheet, but it's about like, tell me the story, tell me what's happened. And I think there's instances where maybe that can move the needle, but at a minimum, we want to have a really comprehensive understanding of what are the drivers in your business, what are the challenges that you faced, and then we can make an informed decision on, okay, is this something that we feel comfortable if it's maybe a little bit outside of our typical kind of boundaries. One of the things that my colleague Mark likes to say is we have guardrails, but our guardrails are made of rubber, not steel, right? They're intended to be flexible. They're intended to be able to listen and pivot when and where needed.
A lot of aggregators that came into the space, they came with a lot of money, a lot of financial backing, A lot of smart people, a lot of Harvard MBAs and really good finance people from Wall Street. They come into this, they buy a bunch of businesses, and they say, holy shit, we can't, how do we execute on this? Because these operators are like little mom and pop shops for the most part. And they're guerrilla marketing. They're nimble as a fly. They're not coming from a corporate world with all this structure. And when these aggregators come in, they try to execute. A lot of them have had serious problems. And hiring good people and even training good people that can take this over. How do you guys deal with that issue?
Yeah, so I think this is where, as somebody who was a seller, I was able to share some insight kind of internally with our leadership team. And we've, our view and really the thesis coming into building Unybrands was, we actually want to acquire the brand. We want to retain the founding team and enable them to be that much more successful with their brand. And our first handful of acquisitions, we found that, the market didn't really have an appetite for that. I think people were looking to, kind of cash out and move on to whatever's next, which is perfectly fair. But we ultimately did do some transactions that we retained the founders. And so we were able to capture that expertise. We were able to capture that knowledge and insight. And then I think ultimately, we were able to capture some of the culture that they have and how they operated their brands and let that flow into how Unybrands operates. And so that has been a tremendous value add for us. I think we're always thinking about, what else can we learn? And that's why we come to events like $1 Billion Seller Summit to learn, to rub elbows with founders, to make sure that we're staying close to that. But I think, to your point, there was a lot of people that came from outside of the industry and assumed, this was strictly kind of a financial play, and underestimated the challenge of operating on Amazon. One of the things that I recall is, Amazon is an ever moving target. Things are always in flux. They're always changing. So you can't necessarily just build a model and run with it. You really have to be agile and flexible and able to move kind of at the drop of a dime.
How do you deal with the risk factor? I mean, you could have a hero product on an account that you buy, and just suddenly something happens. Somebody attacks the listing, it's just something goes awry, and you lose that whole thing. How do you mitigate that risk? Or what do you got? How do you factor that in? Because stuff can, like you just said, can change overnight on Amazon. You're cruising for 3 years, just doing well, and all of a sudden there's a supply chain issue, or your account gets hacked and the pictures get replaced with nasty pictures or whatever. How do you mitigate that risk as an acquirer?
Yeah, I don't know that there is a foolproof way to mitigate that risk, right? I think this is where having those Harvard MBAs and those people that come from that world can really start to become beneficial for us. Is we do a tremendous amount of work in the pre-LOI and in the post-LOI phase to really dig in deep and understand everything that's at play in the business. One, to just understand what are we buying, and one thing that we do kind of in our acquisition process is we'll essentially, once we're in diligence, kind of run the brand alongside the founder to understand, hey, this is happening. How do you act, right? What would you do here? In an instance where we retain the founder, obviously we have that for quite a bit longer, but let's say the founder wants to go off and do something else. We want to try to capture as much of that knowledge and information as possible, so that, we can make the best kind of decisions. But I think there's no way to actually control for that. I think the best option on our end is to as thoroughly vet the business as possible, to understand it as well as possible, to understand how the founder would act in certain situations as well as possible, and then respond accordingly.
So you guys look for any kind of product, or what if it's a commodity? Do you prefer to not deal with commodities and to deal with something that's more truly unique and differentiated? Or what? How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, so that's actually a part of our analysis, right? Like one of the sayings that we use internally is we want to avoid catching a falling knife, right? And so part of our analysis is understanding the specific asset that we're looking to acquire, understanding kind of the adjacency. So who are the competitors? Who are the kind of incumbents in the space that are maybe slow into e-commerce, but that are going to be moving there eventually, because that's a potential risk? What's the likelihood of Amazon coming in and introducing Amazon Basics or leveraging one of their other kind of in-house brands? And so we're looking at kind of all of that to really have confidence around, okay, we feel like this is a category that, let's say, we'll face competition, but we're not facing Amazon Basics or some other major brand coming in. So there's a tremendous amount of work, I think, that goes into that for us to feel confident and feel comfortable. We do typically look to avoid commoditized products. I think, we like to say we're looking for high quality differentiated products. I think differentiation can show up in a number of ways. In some instances, maybe that's a really strong review moat. In others, maybe it's really tremendous branding. It can be a really strong repeat purchase rate. Maybe they're driving traffic from elsewhere onto an Amazon listing that's doing incredibly well. I think there's no kind of single definition for that. But we absolutely look for high quality differentiated products and brands.
And are you taking them into retail as well now, or just helping them expand in the U.S. and internationally?
So currently, we're focused on the U.S. and international expansion. Amazon, we'll do a little bit of direct consumer as well. I think we've really assembled a world-class team, and as they continue to get up to speed, we're starting to roll in other parts of it. So do we evaluate expansion beyond just the U.S. and Europe? Do we start to think about retail at some point? I think for us, it's never been a rush. I think it's really about let's build a platform that's sustainable, that will be here in 20 years, in 50 years. And I think in order to do that, we maybe move a little bit slower, or a little bit more methodical. But that ensures that we build a really solid foundation that we can continue to build on.
So what's the play for Unybrands? Is it to IPO? Is it to continue running? Is it to sell to a larger company and exit as a roll-up? What's the play there?
Yeah, I would say the play is to build a world-class CPG company. We're not at all focused on liquidity events, whether that's an IPO or a roll into somebody else. I think it really is about let's build a special platform. Let's acquire the best brands in the world. Let's ensure that founders feel like they're well cared for when they interact with us. And I think the rest will kind of take care of itself.
So if I'm a seller and I'm looking to sell my business and I come to you, what are like 3 main things I need to make sure I got my ducks in line for before I talk to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. I think the first one is think about what you want out of an exit early on, right? Like I think about what are you comfortable with, what are you not comfortable with. And so what I mean by that are you comfortable negotiating? Because we're not that we're going to take care of you and we want to be fair, but we're also professional buyers, right? And so are you comfortable kind of managing all of that, or would you rather have somebody else, such as a broker or a banker, come in and kind of represent you? I think having your financials in order is incredibly important. I think a world-class accountant is worth their weight in gold. You would be amazed at the number of brands that I've seen that the founder just doesn't have a hold on kind of where money's going, the margin. We have a call and hey, the margin is XYZ, and then we actually dig into the P&L and it's a quarter of that, right? And so and they can't speak to where things are going. And so I think having a really strong kind of accounting and finance team is tremendous. I think that applies to having a really great lawyer as well. I think that's incredibly important. And then I think, the last thing, one of the things for us, when we think about the valuation, typically you have, what are your earnings? And then that's multiplied by some type of multiple. And the multiple is really where you have an opportunity to create added value. And the multiple, let's say between a 3 and a 4 times and a 5 and a 6 times, often is going to be about, some of the other kind of intangible parts of your business. So have you really kind of outlined the SOPs for the business? Have you built it to where it's turnkey ready for us to take it, to hit the ground running and to start scaling it? Have you left some meat on the bones for us to continue to scale the brand? Have you laid out a plan for what we need to be able to do that successfully? I think those are all things that can create added value for us, but will also help to increase your valuation when you're looking to exit.
Now, I hear from a lot of sellers that have sold that they say the due diligence process is kind of a pain in the ass. It takes 60 to 90 days in some cases. Some people say they can do it in 30, but typically it takes a little longer than that. And you guys are just asking for every document under the sun and every support thing, and they're scrambling around trying to find it. It's almost like a full-time job to sell your business on top of continuing to run your business.
Yes.
Any advice you have on that aspect of things for a seller?
Yeah, of course. So I think, first and foremost, it's never too early to start thinking about selling your business. And this kind of goes to my prior point, right, of having a great accounting and finance team. Is, let's say you're looking to exit in 2024, start thinking about that today. Put the pieces in place, shoot me an email. Let's have a chat because I can tell you what we need so that you're ahead of the 8 ball. And so when you're actively starting to entertain offers, let's say in the middle or end of 2023, you're ahead of the 8 ball. You've got what you need, and that's, I think, kind of streamlines that process. I think that's the first and most important thing. One thing I can kind of say about our experience is we actually really try to front load our diligence process. So I would say we probably ask for more than most others in the pre-LOI stage. And that's because we really want to understand the business so that when we send you an LOI, that's a valuation that we feel confident in, that we can stand behind with, that without the introduction of kind of new information, that's not going to fluctuate or change. And so I think that's key. I think, again, you can leverage a broker. This is what they do day in and day out. And they can kind of act as that buffer when you're going through the process to ensure that, you're, again, free to focus on your business and they're kind of dealing with us outside of obviously calls and different things that you have to take like that.
How important is the relationship between you and the seller when you're approaching a business? Is it all just about the numbers on a piece of paper, or is there something to it where you like this guy or this gal or something? And is there any personal things that's come into play when you're selling your business, or is it just strictly black and white numbers?
Yeah, so I'll kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth. I think if we don't have a great relationship, that doesn't mean you're going to get a lower valuation multiple, right? Like, that's not fair. That's not us sticking to kind of the fundamentals of our business, where we're going to treat all sellers fair. We're going to pay a fair valuation of your multiple, whether we like you or not. Like, I think that's core to kind of who we are. But I think having a good relationship certainly adds value. If nothing else, you just have another advocate that's pushing to get the deal done, that understands your business maybe a little bit more closely than they might have otherwise. And so I absolutely think it's beneficial to have a relationship. And at the end of the day, like, we're buying your business. Typically, there's going to be an earnout component to that. And so I think having a strong relationship just makes it that much easier, because we're going to be tied together in some capacity. And then, all of the transactions that we've done where we've retained the founding team, I think we have tremendous relationships with those founders. Again, they've contributed to Unybrands beyond, revenue, but from a culture, from a quality, from a people standpoint as well.
So when you say earnout, let's explain what that is. So when you sell your company, let's say you sell it for $3 million, there's a certain amount of that that's wire transferred in cash on the day of closing, and the rest is considered what's an earnout, where you have to stay on, advise, or manage it for a certain amount of time, or the company has to hit certain sales targets, and then you get paid the rest of that, and maybe even a little bonus if it goes over a certain thing. What is typically the splits? I know every deal is a little bit different, but what's a typical split between cash and pocket percentage and future earnings or earnout percentage? And how long is that earnout usually?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's going to vary with kind of every acquirer. For us, typically, I think you'll see cash at close between 70 and kind of 90%. It varies. I think we tend to be a little bit heavier on the cash at close side. And then typically we have two earnouts. So we have a binary and a pro rata. So binary is based off of, hey, do you hit this threshold? Let's say hypothetically 20% growth. Then you'll receive that first earnout, and then you'll receive the second earnout on a pro rata basis between 20 and 40% growth. And so we feel like that's a pretty fair structure. Haven't really received pushback on that. But I think, again, it's going to vary. I've heard of others where they're doing 50 or less percent cash at close, and then you see more heavily weighted towards an earnout, or and there's other mechanisms you can use. There's stability payments, there's deferred payments. There's I think we have certainly kind of a standard structure we like to use, but we're also always open to what does the founder have in mind, right? Like, this is a partnership. This is about creating a transaction we both feel really good about. So let's have that conversation.
What's your general feeling on where e-commerce is going? Do you think it's going to continue to grow? There's in the press, there was the COVID bump, and then there's all this negativity now. Amazon's laying off people. Everybody's laying off people. And so there's this doom and gloom kind of thing that, but I think some of that's just overhyped a little bit. I think e-commerce is still where it's at, and it's still going to continue to be where it's at. So what are your thoughts on where this whole industry is going?
Yeah, I would echo your sentiment. I think things are never as bad as they seem, and things are also never as good as they seem, right? I think the COVID bump pulled a lot of demand kind of forward for e-comm. I think consumers have demonstrated that there's certain items that they want to purchase that are tangible. They want to touch, feel, smell, kind of have direct access to before making that purchase. And I think that's a good thing. I think of my wife and I, we've been looking at buying some new, furniture for our living room for the last, let's say 6 months. We've been looking online. We went down to West Elm last weekend, and it was just that much more effective to actually sit on stuff and touch it and feel it and all of that. And so I don't think retail is going anywhere. I certainly don't think e-commerce is going anywhere as well. I'm super, super bullish on e-comm. I think, I touched on this a little bit before. I think the emergence of micro brands, where people that have maybe historically been underrepresented as it relates to products that capture who they are or that are for their specific use case or their need. I think the emergence of these brands that actually have stories that align with these consumers is tremendous. And I think that we'll only continue to see growth in the number of micro brands. I think the barriers to entry to build brands is lower than it's ever been. Obviously, it's competitive as well, but I think you've got more people interested in entrepreneurship, more people interested in starting their own companies. So I think the future is incredibly bright for e-commerce.
And if someone that's listening wants to reach out and talk to an incredibly bright aggregator or someone like yourself, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you're more than welcome to shoot me an email. My email is Korion, it's Korion at Unybrands. That's UNYBRANDS.com. And I'm happy to send my cell number that way. I'm always happy for a chat. Shoot me a text, give me a call. We can connect on LinkedIn. I'm here to support people through their journey. I'm happy to share insight on my own experience, what I wish I'd learned or wish I knew, or just talk. Or maybe I won't do the one chip challenge with you, but I'll at least talk you through how to manage it.
Cool, Korion, I really appreciate you coming on today and suffering through me trying to speak here as I'm recovering from pneumonia. But this has been great. It's been fun.
Likewise, I really appreciate you having me. Really, really glad to hear that you're on the mend, and looking forward to seeing you again in person here soon. And wishing you and the family happy holidays.
I appreciate it. Same to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Korion's a really smart guy. So if you got questions about the exit process, or you're thinking about exiting, or maybe it's now, or maybe it's in a few years, feel free to reach out to him at that email address he gave. Also, don't forget, Helium 10 now has a new course called Exit Ticket. That's right. There's the Freedom Ticket, which I do, and now there's Exit Ticket. And it's a really good comprehensive, 6 intensive modules with subsections in each of those modules that breaks down the exact process and everything you need to think about when it comes to exiting your business. It's hosted by Scott Dietz, along with Bradley and Carrie. Scott is from the Northbound Group. He's one of the smartest guys out there in the space. So be sure to check out Exit Ticket. You can find that under the tools section and the educational materials under your Helium 10 account. It's free for anybody that has a Helium 10 account. It's a really great course. Really, really good information for anybody considering exiting their business. Until next week, I hope you have a awesome December, an awesome fourth quarter. Hope things are going well for you. And I just want to leave you with one little thought, as I always do at the end. Do you know wealth, freedom, and security come from what you own, not what you do? Think about that for a second. Wealth, freedom, and security come from what you own, not what you do. We'll see you next time.